Too many businesses in the world are sitting on an application infrastructure that was written for a world that was fundamentally non-real-time, a world of paper bills. And those businesses are not going to be able to service the Facebook generation who expect to see information in real time in the context that it's appropriate without a fundamental renewing not just of the underlying IT infrastructure but of the applications themselves. So we face a crucial issue of how do we become fundamentally more efficient in our existing operations in order to free up the funds for the future. Each era is defined by a set of canonical applications. The applications that defined the mini-computer and mainframe area were really bookkeeping applications. How did we take bookkeeping functions and automate that? And that gave rise to not just the systems we had, but the application technologies, the data fabrics. And then something happened, which was the client-server area, which was the first interaction for the first time of consumer-driven technology coming into the IT world. We went from PCs that introduced, as you'll see in a moment, new technologies in both silicon and software. That was then accentuated by the web, a great example actually of the defense community giving back technology to the consumer world. Now we're going into the third era. And the key thing here is we're going from hundreds of millions of users to billions of users. And it's not just personal computers that they're holding in their hands. 3 years ago, approximately 90% plus of all devices attached to the internet were personal computers. Sometime in the near future, and depending whose numbers you believe, it might actually happen in the next 12 months, 50% or more of the devices attached to the internet will not be PCs. And within 3 years, PCs will probably be less than 20% of the devices attached to the internet. And it'll not only be devices that have a human attached to them, but also sensor devices that are feeding information in unprecedented quantities. So we're going to see enormous growth in scale. Scale not only in terms of the number of users, but scale in terms of the number of sources of potential real-time information. This is going to drive similar change. The days when IT could say, we know that every individual in our domain has a black laptop with exactly this build of Windows on it, is rapidly passing. And they know that they're never going to get it back. That the devices users will hold in their hands will largely not be under their control, and not only not under their control, but actually not even owned by the enterprise. Tremendous challenge for us in the industry, which is how do we deliver the fruits of all these applications in a secure way where the endpoint itself is becoming much more heterogeneous and less under the control of the CIO. This is going to be an important issue for us to address in the industry as we go forward, which we think, for a couple of reasons that I'll outline as well, is going to lead us into a new era of end-user computing. I agree with Steve Jobs when he says we are entering the post-PC era, and that is actually also very profound and has a lot of implications that I'll touch on towards the end of my presentation. Unfortunately, we in IT only have very coarse metrics today to manage IT. If you're the CEO, basically today you really have two decisions you can make about IT. What % of my revenue do I want to spend on IT? And do I want to entrust it to the bunch of guys that I have, or do I want to outsource it and give it to a bunch of different guys? Really, that's what a CEO can do with IT today, and it's not a very satisfying world to be in, as you can talk to any CEO and they'll tell you that. And part is we don't have objective measures that allow us to shine a light under the hedge and find out how we are really doing in the IT world. Now with this cloud era, we're starting for the first time to get blunt but effective measures of IT. For the first time now, you can go and say to your IT department, Mr. CIO, What does it cost us to provision a virtual machine of a certain size per unit time? Tell me what the answer is. And don't give me anything else. Just tell me what it costs you in cents per minute. Tell me, Mr. CIO, what it costs you in cents per gigabyte per month to store information. Tell me what it costs you to support an email box. Tell me how quickly you can stand up a new service. And you can take those numbers and start for the first time to compare them to an external rate card. For the first time, you as a CEO or a CFO can take numbers from your CIO and go compare them to a price list that Amazon and others are establishing. And you can say, why is it, Mr. CIO, when you're telling me it's costing us 15 cents per virtual machine per hour and XYZ down the road's willing to sell that to me for 5 cents per hour. But at the end of the day, it comes down to leadership. To take it all the way through to basically operating in a more informed way, it takes leadership. The third phase is when the CIO takes ownership of this and says, we're going to use these techniques to run ourselves in a fundamentally different way. We're going to measure the production and consumption of IT and use that measurement to drive efficiency both through ourselves and put a lot of the onus back into our customers to establish priorities for us. This is going to be important, as I said, for security in the future, because one theme that I'll briefly touch on is security starts at the perimeter, but it has to successively move closer and closer and closer to the applications, because every time you set up a barrier, people figure out a way to get over that barrier, and then they start to attack the next barrier. Ultimately, security is going to have to go right inside the application itself. You're not going to be able to trust other modules that you're talking to. We're going to have to move to a world of trust, but verify at every level of abstraction, ultimately reaching right into the applications itself. And these programming frameworks provide a way, and they have some very sophisticated techniques, where you can introduce code into an application written by a separate team from the application logic coders that will sit there and basically monitor what's going on in a non-obtrusive way. And these are the kind of techniques that we're going to have to adopt to get ultimate security. We need different ways of connecting applications to the underlying infrastructure. Our industry came up two or three decades ago now with Linux/Unix as a cloaking layer to hide the underlying hardware, to make it easier to make sure that when you wrote applications, you could amortize that cost across different instruction sets and different computer systems. Now, clouds are becoming the new hardware. Are we going to move to a world where these clouds become like the mainframes of the 60s and 70s, where when you write an application in that space, you can never move out of that cloud? If you write for Google's cloud or Microsoft's cloud or whatever, are you condemned forever to be hosted in that cloud? We believe that the open source community and the development community will not stand for that ultimately, and a new cloaking layer will come about. Lastly, I want to touch very briefly on the end-user computing transformation. Again, a lengthy topic here, so I'll just touch it at a very high level. The challenge here is we need to go beyond the desktop. The Windows desktop in enterprises served two functions to date. On the one hand, it was the user interface to a particular operating system. On the other hand, it was the conduit or mechanism by which IT prescribed what capabilities a user could see. That's where you installed applications, where you turned on and off menus, you dropped files there, etc. It was the portal or the container that you created for the user that held basically the set of capabilities and resources that that user could legitimately access. In this new world, we need a new desktop for provisioning and security that belongs to the user, not to a particular device. Again, it has to provide a bridge from the past to the future. We can't walk away from the long tail of Windows legacy applications, but we have to realize that new applications, by and large, are going to be written in the HTML5 world. This will be the new API that applications get written to in a device-independent way. And we need to bring both of those worlds together and provision them through this new, quote-unquote, desktop. So as much as we talk about it, the post-PC era, I think this is really about the post-document era. So the next decade are going to be about redefining the paradigm of what an information worker does in terms of how they consume and manipulate information. So another set of interesting challenges that all fit under this C word, the cloud. That brings me to the end of my presentation. I'll just mention in passing that our company, my company, VMware, is trying to invest in each of these three transitions, trying to figure out where this is going and place our bets accordingly. I won't spend time going through these products, but we do have entries at each of these levels. And we're committed to providing those to all branches of government. I'm very happy to say that our products are in use essentially by all parts of the federal government, and we're very proud to do that. As I mentioned, am an immigrant to this country. I showed up here in 1981 with a wife and a 9-month-old baby and not much else, and have had been extraordinarily fortunate and benefited from everything we have in this country. And I want to just personally thank all of you who have chosen a career of service to protect all of that for other people who can have those benefits. And I'm happy to say that I try to pass that ethic on to my own children, and I have 2 daughters who have both chosen in their own way to serve their country, one through the Peace Corps and the other through Teach for America. So thank you very much.